February 13th was dedicated in discussing the teleological argument, or informally known as the argument from design. In its most basic state, it's this: the order, the regularities, the patterns, and the purposes of everything we see around us, everything in the universe. If everything were to be random, this seems very, very not random. It seems like everything just fits together and works, and thus it almost necessitates that there must have been somebody that designed all of this, right? A grand designer or a god. Now, we first have to understand what teleology is. It comes from the Greek word telos, which means end or result. And it's actually, the word teleology, it's a branch of philosophy. And what they are concerned in is the purposes of everything. Now, if you take a roll of tape and you go up to a teleologist and you ask what this is, they won't give you the name. They won't say tape. They won't say what it's made of, the materials. Instead, they'll say that is an entity that is used to put things together, right? They will give you the purpose of everything because that's all they're interested in. That's teleology. Now, we're looking at this guy, Paley. He wrote a work, Natural Theology, different word, in the start of the 19th century. Now, what he's basically the guy who's really went into depth into the teleological argument, pardon me. And in order to understand his work, Natural Theology, we have to understand theology. Now, it's simple. Theology, study of the divine and of God and of religion, right? But there are two forms of it. There is revealed theology, which is based on supernatural revelation, or when like a god or something communicates or has correspondence to us humans, usually in the form of a book, like the Bible or Torah, Quran, right? But that is revealed theology. When you look at like actual communication, and then that's not what we talk in this class, because that's the validity of all those works can be contested, and it doesn't really help us philosophers who like to reason and think. Instead, what we are interested in is natural theology, which is, again, the name of his book. Natural theology is based on reasoning and knowledge of our natural world, what we see around us, right? That's what we're interested in. Now, here is what Paley gives us. He gives us a little like metaphor story to think about. Imagine you're with a friend running across a pasture and you stub your toe on a rock in the middle of a green pasture. Your friend asks, "Why is that rock there?" Now you might say, "Yeah, well, it's always been there." And while you might not be 100% okay with that answer, you're still okay with it because, I mean, it is a rock and it happened to be there, and who cares if it's been there forever? I mean, who really cares where it came from? But let's say you're doing this whole frolicking thing a month later with your friend. But instead of stubbing your toe on a rock, you come across a watch. Your friend asks, "Well, why is that watch there?" You cannot give the answer you gave before for this watch, because the watch is not just something that could happen randomly. It's not something that just could have happened over time. It's something that someone created, the brainchild of somebody. Some designer created this to have a purpose. It's intricate. Trust me, watches are intricate. I never understood it until I actually saw like a video on it. Before the modern day with electronic watches, watches were incredibly intricate. So that's why we always use that a watch as an analogy or metaphor or example. Now, you can't just, it's too intricate, right? Now he's applying it, he's going to apply it in a different light. Now think of a telescope, right? It has a purpose. Like the watch, it has a purpose, but it was also designed by a designer. It was designed to do the purpose, and it's very intricate, and it does its job. But think about the human's eye. The eye has a purpose, to see, right? Well, Let's just go with that for now, because you can actually contest that. Let's say the eye's purpose is to see. Let's look at the design, right? The way it's made. You got the pupil, you have the lens, you have the retina, you have all these little cells, the rods, the cones, you have the veins, you have this goop inside. It's very, very intricate. It's incredibly intricate, actually, incredibly complex, and does an amazing job at its job, which is to give sight, right? Could that happen randomly? Poses Paley. And for him, he argues that it's inconceivable that something that intricate that does that purpose was not designed. Just the way a watch, something that intricate that has a purpose, was designed. Now, right there, he did something called an argument from analogy. He took these two things and created an analogy out of them, right? He compared a watch which has a purpose and is complex and has a designer. And because it is complex and has a purpose, therefore we look at an eye, which is very complex, has a purpose, therefore it must have a designer. Now that's his argument. You can contest that all you will, and people do. The first more broad example against this that we discussed in class was called Stupid Design by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Basically, he says everything is bad and therefore couldn't have been designed. Now, think about if everything were designed for humanity, right? Look at the universe. We cannot survive in the universe. It's a void. There's no air in the vast majority of it. It's way too hot or way too cold. There's radiation and all this sorts of shit that will kill you. You cannot survive in 99.99, well, actually 100%. It's a rounding error if you say 0.99999. You cannot survive anywhere else, right? So therefore, it couldn't have been designed. But let's bring it back in. Then Tyson says, the world. Think about the world. If it were designed, why do we have volcanoes that kill people? Why do we have hurricanes, earthquakes? Why do we have asteroids? Why has 90% of all species that have ever existed, why are the 90% of all species gone, extinct? Why have they died if everything was so designed? And then he brings it even closer. Why, the humans, we suck. We have AIDS. We have blindness. We have our cells, our DNA it deteriorates. We have weird genetic mutations. We have cancer. We have AIDS, Parkinson's. We deteriorate over time. We have awful diseases. We have birth defects. Babies are born with the hearts outside of their bodies. We have babies stillborn. If we were really designed, argues Tyson, why weren't we designed better? Or good. We were designed stupidly. That's the stupid design argument. Now, the big argument that we discussed is David Hume's. This is an old guy. He was alive from 1711 to 1776. God bless America. Now, in order to understand David Hume's, we have to go through 4 definitions. We talked before about empiricism, and that is the ideology where knowledge, all that we know, is derived from experience. We only know anything, and we should only ought to know anything by observing. Scientists are like this. Conduct an experiment, observe, and then form a conclusion. We have a scientific process, and it's all based on observation and experience. It's empirical. The opposite of that, the other end of the dichotomy, is actually something called rationalism, where people believe that all knowledge that we ought to believe, it can only come about through reason, that we have to use rational thought to get to any sort of knowledge. The third thing we have to know is actually something called skepticism. And skeptics are people that refuse to state that they know a fact. An example of this are agnostics. They will acknowledge, okay, there's no proof, experiential proof of God. There's no proof of it. But there's also no real proof against no God, because saying that there is no God is just as powerful a statement as saying there is a God. So what skeptics do is they recognize this and just be quiet about it. Quite frankly, they don't care because they don't believe you can say yes or know anything for certain. Those are skeptics. David Hume was both an empiricist and a skeptic, okay? And that's what informed his argument against teleology, or the teleological argument, I should say. And he did this in his work, Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. And it's a dialogue between three people, and each offer different arguments. But the most important thing you have to know is the third person, Philo, goes against what the first person, Cleanthes, brings up. And Cleanthes is the representation in his work of course, Paley's argument of design. And Paley creates that analogy that we were talking before, right? The whole, well, machinery, the clock has a purpose, very intricate, has a designer. The eye has a purpose, very, very intricate, must be designed, right? That, like the argument from analogy, it's called. That's what Cleanthes brings up. But Philo rejects it. And this is the premise that Philo has an issue with. Just because something has a like cause doesn't mean it has a like effect, right? Let's say you're tired right now listening to this, or you're just tired right now. There could be many, many causes, but one effect. You could have slept not enough. Hell, you could have overslept. You could have gone to the gym. You could have taken melatonin, right? There are many effects. So you cannot, just because there are like causes, you can't go back in time and say retroactively it was the same effect. We're looking at the analogy right now. We see the eye. Okay, great. Purpose, great. Complexity, great. Okay, that's the after the fact. Look at the clock. Great. We know after the fact it has a purpose, tell time, and it's very intricate. But we know the cause is a designer. Someone designed it. But you cannot do this retroactive thing. You cannot say, because you know that it applies to the eye, that there must be a designer then. Because in order to know that, him being the empiricist, he argues, the only way to know that is true is if you have experience. And does anyone have experience that the eye, humans, animals, the universe was designed? No. You do not have experience of that. And because of that, he argues this weaker form, trust me, this is the weaker form of the argument from design, does not work. It's not good. Next week, we'll actually talk about the better form and probably the best argument we have for the existence of God, which is the fine-tuning argument. Hope you found this helpful, and thank you.